The storm outside cracked like a warning shot as the black Rolls-Royce glided silently into the gated driveway. Ethan Harrow, the billionaire heir to Harrow Industries, had returned to his family's mansion without notice. His business trip in Switzerland had been cut short. Too many whispers about betrayal in the company boardroom, too many nagging doubts that something in his personal life wasn't as it seemed. The mansion was quiet, eerily so, when he stepped inside. The staff usually rushed to greet him, shoes clicking against the marble floors, but this time, nothing. No butler bowing, no echo of polite greetings. Just the faint hum of the grandfather clock in the hall and the distant smell of something cooking, something he didn't recognize. Ethan loosened his tie, running a hand over his stubbled jaw. He had called no one, informed no one of his early arrival. That was deliberate. He wanted to see the truth of his home when no one was expecting him. His father, William Harrow, was upstairs, confined to a wheelchair after a stroke 3 years ago. The once mighty titan of steel and oil now lived in silence and shadows, his sharp mind trapped inside a fragile, weakened body. Ethan visited often, but rarely without announcement. He had always feared what he might find if he came unannounced. Tonight, that fear would manifest. As he moved through the long, dim corridors, he noticed something odd: laughter. A woman's laughter, soft but rich, rolling from the east wing, the private quarters reserved for his father. Ethan froze mid-step, his pulse spiking. His father hadn't laughed in years, not since the stroke. And yet, beneath that laughter, there was another sound. A man's broken chuckle, raspy and labored, his father's voice. Impossible. Ethan's polished shoes were silent against the Persian carpet as he followed the sound. The door to his father's study stood ajar. A golden sliver of lamplight stretched across the hallway floor, and from within came the murmur of voices. He recognized the female voice now, Maria, the maid. She was young, far too young to be working in this house of silence and ghosts. Beautiful, too, he had noticed it, though he never allowed himself to linger on the thought. She had been his father's caretaker for nearly 2 years, patient and soft-spoken, filling the role of nurse and maid both. But what was she doing now? Ethan leaned closer, and through the crack in the door, he saw it. Maria was seated on the edge of his father's bed, her hand resting gently on William's. Her dark hair framed her face as she leaned closer, whispering something that made the old man's lips twitch with effort until a sound, half laugh, half groan, escaped him. William Harrow was smiling. Smiling, for the first time in years. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Maria reached into a small wooden box on the nightstand, pulling out an old photograph. It was faded at the edges, a relic from decades past. She held it up in front of William's eyes. "See, sir, this was you. This was strength. You carried your son on your shoulders in this very garden." Ethan blinked. The photograph was of him, no older than 6, clinging to his father's broad shoulders, both of them laughing in the sun. The old man's trembling fingers rose, brushing the picture, and a tear rolled down his cheek. Maria's own voice broke. "He loves you still. I see it in his eyes every time he speaks of you." Ethan staggered back, his heart pounding. Love. He hadn't spoken of love for his father in years. Their relationship had grown brittle, fractured by wealth, power, and years of unspoken resentment. But Maria, she had been filling the silence. She had given his father something Ethan had not: warmth. But there was more. As he stood frozen, Maria leaned closer to his father, her lips trembling as if she wanted to confess something more than comfort. Her face was inches from William's, and the intimacy of it was undeniable. Ethan's vision swam. 1,000 possibilities flooded his mind. Was this manipulation? A caretaker exploiting his father's vulnerability? Or was it something else, something frightening, something he couldn't yet name? And then his father's voice, broken but clear, clawed through the room. "Maria, promise me, you'll tell him." "Tell me what?" Ethan's hand tightened on the doorknob, his breath ragged. He wasn't sure whether to storm in or flee. But one thing was certain. Whatever truth Maria was holding, it had the power to shatter everything. The storm outside roared louder, rattling the mansion's windows, as Ethan pushed the door open at last. The heavy door creaked as Ethan stepped into the study. Both heads turned, Maria's eyes widening in shock, and William's trembling hand clenching tighter around the photograph. For a long, unbearable moment, silence consumed the room, broken only by the storm rattling against the windows. "Mr. Harrow," Maria whispered, rising quickly from the bed as if caught in some unforgivable act. Her cheeks flushed, But her eyes, those dark, searching eyes, held something far deeper than guilt. Ethan's jaw tightened. He felt like an intruder in his own home, like the stranger here wasn't Maria, but himself. "What?" he said, his voice low and dangerous, "exactly is going on?" Maria swallowed hard. I was just keeping your father company. He hasn't smiled in weeks. Tonight he wanted. Enough. Ethan's glare cut through her words. "I come home unannounced, and I find the maid whispering secrets to my father. Telling him things he's too weak to understand. Showing him pictures from my childhood as if you were there." William's hand trembled violently. Then, the name cracked out of his throat like broken glass, and it startled Ethan into silence. His father hadn't spoken his name in years. Maria turned back to the old man, her voice trembling with urgency. "Don't strain yourself, sir. Please." But William shook his head, the veins in his forehead tightening as he forced the words out. "He must know." "Know what?" Ethan demanded, his patience shredding. His chest heaved with questions, his heart racing against the unknown. Maria's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked at Ethan as though standing at the edge of a cliff. Her eyes shimmered, not with fear, but with the burden of holding back something too heavy. "Your father asked me to show him joy again. To remind him of who he was before the sickness. That's all I've done. Don't lie to me." Ethan stepped closer, his shoes echoing against the hardwood floor. "I heard him tell you to promise to tell me something. What is it? What game are you playing here?" The maid's hands trembled, but she didn't retreat. She met his gaze directly, and for the first time, Ethan realized she wasn't just a servant, there was fire in her, something that couldn't be ordered away. "Your father has carried a secret for years," Maria said slowly. "One he could never bring himself to tell you. When he asked me to promise, he meant that. But it isn't my place." "Then it's mine to demand," Ethan cut in. He looked at his father, whose frail body shook as if every word cost him a lifetime. "Is this true? All these years, you let strangers feed me scraps of affection, while you, what? Sat here choking on secrets?" Tears welled in William's faded eyes. He reached for his son's hand, but Ethan did not move. It was Maria who guided the photograph back into William's grip, steadying him as though she had always been his strength. The storm cracked again, and the lights flickered. Shadows leapt across the walls. Maria drew in a breath, as though steeling herself for a confession that could unravel everything. "Your father asked me to care for him," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But he also asked me to guard something else. Something about your mother." Ethan's blood ran cold. His mother, Eleanor Harrow, had died in a car accident nearly 2 decades ago. The pain had defined his youth, shaped his anger, and pushed him into the ruthless businessman he had become. To suggest there was more to that story was unthinkable. "My mother," he said, the words sharp as a blade. "She's been gone for 20 years. What could possibly be left to tell?" Maria's voice trembled. "That's for your father to say. Not me." William tried to speak, but his throat collapsed into a violent cough. Maria rushed to steady him, placing a glass of water against his lips, whispering words of calm. Ethan's chest ached at the sight, the maid's tender devotion, the father he hardly recognized, the unbearable weight of unanswered truths. Finally, William rasped, "She didn't die the way you think." The room fell utterly still. Ethan felt his knees weaken, but rage kept him upright. "What are you saying?" Maria looked down, unable to hold his gaze. "Please, let him tell it himself. But you must understand, when you hear it, nothing will ever be the same again." William's eyes pleaded with his son as another tear slipped down his cheek. The storm outside wailed, as though echoing the gravity of what was about to be revealed. And Ethan, for the first time in years, felt truly afraid. Ethan stood frozen, every muscle tense, as the words echoed in his head, "She didn't die the way you think." His chest rose and fell in heavy waves. For 20 years, he had lived with the image of his mother's death, the twisted wreck of the car, the headlines, the silence his father never broke. And now, here in the dim light of the study, his father dared to suggest it had all been a lie. "Explain," Ethan demanded, his voice breaking through the storm outside. "No riddles, no half-truths. Tell me what really happened." William's lips trembled. He tried to speak, but his frail body betrayed him. The words came out like sand slipping through broken glass. "It wasn't an accident." The ground seemed to shift beneath Ethan. He felt the room tilt, the storm pressing in on the mansion's walls. "Not an accident? What do you mean?" Maria lowered her gaze, as if bracing for the pain Ethan was about to endure. Your father told me the truth months ago. But he was terrified you would hate him forever if you knew. Hate him? Ethan's voice cracked, sharp with fury. I already hated him, for his silence, for abandoning me in grief. And now you're telling me he's been hiding the truth of my mother's death. William's trembling hand lifted again, this time managing to graze Ethan's wrist. His eyes burned with urgency. Your mother didn't die that night. She left. Ethan staggered back, the words hitting harder than any blade could. What? Maria finally spoke, her voice low and heavy with sorrow. Your mother didn't die in the crash. She staged it, with help. She wanted to escape this life, the wealth, the cage of the Harrow name. She ran away. The storm howled, lightning tearing the night sky, but inside the room Ethan felt only silence. His legs nearly gave out beneath him. For years, he had carried grief like armor, had built an empire of ice around the wound of his mother's death. And now she was alive somewhere, living a life without him. No, Ethan whispered, shaking his head violently. That's impossible. She loved me. She loved us. William's voice rasped, desperate. She loved, but she feared. She couldn't live in the shadows of power, of me. She chose freedom, over family. Ethan's stomach turned. His vision blurred as rage and heartbreak collided inside him. So all this time, while I mourned, while I bled myself dry building this empire in her memory, she was alive. She abandoned me. Maria stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly. Your father tried to protect you from the truth. He thought it kinder to let you believe she was gone, rather than let you live with the knowledge that she walked away. Ethan's laugh was hollow, broken. Kinder. Do you have any idea what this did to me? I became a man carved out of grief. I killed every softness in me because I thought love was fragile, fleeting. If I had known she left, if I had known she chose to live without me, at least I would have had a reason to hate her. Instead, I hated myself. Tears streamed down Maria's face now, and even William wept, his shoulders shaking as he reached out again for his son. Forgive me, the old man begged. Ethan pulled back. For the first time, he saw his father not as a titan, not as the ruthless man who had raised him, but as a broken figure drowning in regret. The weight of it pressed down on Ethan's chest until he could hardly breathe. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan turned toward Maria. And you, why did you keep this secret? Maria's voice trembled, but she stood tall. Because he asked me to. And because I saw the burden in your father's eyes every day. He couldn't carry it alone. So I carried it with him. Not out of loyalty to lies, but out of compassion for the dying. Ethan stared at her, his anger softening under the weight of her courage. He saw now that she had not been exploiting his father but saving him, giving him the human connection Ethan had denied him. The storm outside began to fade, the thunder rolling into the distance. In its silence, Ethan finally spoke, his voice raw. So what now? Do I search for her? Do I drag the ghost of a woman who abandoned us back into this house? Maria's eyes glistened. That's your choice. But maybe the truth wasn't meant to destroy you. Maybe it was meant to free you, from lies, from grief, from carrying a weight that was never yours to bear. Ethan looked at his father, frail and broken, and for the first time in decades, he took the old man's hand. William's eyes filled with relief, even as tears spilled freely. Son, I don't forgive you, Ethan whispered. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I understand now, and that's more than I had yesterday. Maria exhaled shakily, as though the house itself could breathe again. The storm passed. The mansion, once suffocating with silence, now held the fragile echoes of truth. Ethan turned toward the window, the photograph still clenched in his fist, the boy on his father's shoulders, smiling in sunlight. For the first time in years, he let himself feel. And though the truth had shattered him, it had also begun, quietly, to rebuild him.